My family did not ruin my wedding in one dramatic burst of chaos. They ruined it the way they had ruined almost every important moment in my life. Slowly. Strategically. And with just enough plausible innocence that I would look unreasonable if I objected. For years, I told myself they were simply intense people. Difficult. Yes. Controlling. Maybe. But still, family. Still the kind of people who would show up when it mattered. When I got engaged, I wanted so badly to believe my wedding would be the exception. I needed that belief. Because if they could take this too, then they really could take anything. In the beginning, they played supportive perfectly. They smiled through venue visits, praised my dress, offered money, and acted as if every opinion they gave was only meant to make the day easier for me. But nothing with them was ever just help. Every offer carried weight. Every suggestion came with pressure. Every opinion became a test of whether I was grateful enough, flexible enough, obedient enough. If I resisted, even politely, I was told I was stressed, sensitive, or hard to please. If I agreed, they took more. Looking back, that was the true beginning of the disaster. Not the wedding day itself, but the moment I confused temporary peace with genuine respect. I thought cooperation would calm them down. In reality, it only taught them that if they pushed carefully enough, I would move. By the time I realized what was happening, my wedding was no longer something I was planning. It was something I was trying to rescue from the people pretending to help me shape it. The control grew in ways that were hard to explain to anyone who wasn't inside it. No single change sounded outrageous on its own, which is exactly why the pattern was so effective. My mother began fixing details I had already finalized. My father started inviting relatives I had specifically said I did not want there, then told me I was being petty for caring. Other family members inserted themselves into logistics they had never been asked to handle, then acted offended if I questioned them. It always came wrapped in moral language. Family. Tradition. Respect. Gratitude. They spoke as if my wedding belonged partly to them because they had raised me, paid for things, or simply decided their feelings mattered more than my choices. The guest list stopped feeling like a list of people I wanted around me and started feeling like a social obligation I was being forced to host. The ceremony became a negotiation. The reception timeline was rewritten more than once because someone in my family thought their preferred moment mattered more than ours. Every time I tried to push back, the room turned on me in the same predictable way. Why was I making things difficult? Why was I trying to exclude people? Why was I so determined to turn a happy event into conflict? That was always their gift. They could commit the violation and still make my reaction feel like the offense. So I did what I had trained myself to do since childhood. I minimized. I compromised. I tried to keep the peace, as if peace and surrender were the same thing. My fiancé kept asking whether we should pull back, uninvite people, stop sharing plans, create distance. I kept saying no, that it would be fine, that I just needed to get through a few more weeks. What I could not say out loud was that part of me was still desperate to be chosen over the family performance. I wanted one moment when they would decide my comfort mattered more than their need to control the room. If your family kept crossing your boundaries like this, even on your own wedding, would you keep the peace or start pushing back no matter what it cost? Comment your choice. On the morning of the wedding, I almost convinced myself I had been wrong. Everything looked beautiful. The schedule was moving. My dress fit perfectly. My fiancé looked calm in the way I usually depended on when I started spiraling. For a few fragile hours, I let myself believe the worst had passed. Then the fractures began to show. One of the first was small but unmistakable. A guest I had explicitly asked not to invite walked in smiling as if they had every right to be there. Before I could even react, my mother pulled me aside and told me not to start anything on such a special day. It was so familiar it made me go cold. Once again, I was being told that someone else's disrespect mattered less than the appearance of harmony. After that, things accelerated. A reading we had carefully chosen was changed without our approval. A private issue I had begged my family not to mention was suddenly being referenced in side conversations loud enough to spread. My father made comments in front of guests that turned deeply personal parts of my life into entertainment. My mother kept grabbing moments that were supposed to be intimate and repurposing them into public emotional scenes that made her look devoted. Each time I tried to step in, someone in my family was already there to tell me to smile. Let it go. Be gracious. Think of the guests. Think of the memories. But those memories were being contaminated in real time. Then came the moment that broke something permanent in me. During the reception, my father stood up to give a speech and turned it into what sounded, to anyone who didn't know our history, like playful family storytelling. But I knew exactly what he was doing. He used the microphone to retell humiliating moments from my life, expose something private I had trusted them not to share, and frame my independence as a joke everyone should laugh at. The room reacted with that horrible mix of laughter and discomfort that happens when cruelty is packaged as charm. I looked at my family expecting, for one irrational second, that someone would stop him. No one did. They smiled. Some even laughed. I wish I could say I stood up right then and publicly confronted them. But that is not what happened. The truth is darker and simpler. I went silent. Years of dealing with them had taught me that if I reacted in visible pain, they would seize control of that too. If I cried, I would be too emotional. If I snapped, I would be unstable. If I called them out, I would be ruining my own wedding. They had built a system where my only acceptable role was absorption. So instead of exploding, I stepped away. I remember walking out of the reception space and feeling the strangest calm settle over me. The kind that only comes when denial finally dies. I was no longer asking myself if they meant harm. I was no longer asking whether I was overreacting. I was no longer trying to salvage a fantasy in which my family loved me in a healthy way but just struggled with boundaries. That fantasy ended the moment they humiliated me publicly on the one day they knew mattered most. Standing there alone, hearing the muffled noise of my own wedding on the other side of the wall, I finally understood that the day was not the exception. It was the clearest proof of the pattern. Every graduation they had turned into a lecture. Every birthday they had redirected. Every milestone they had overshadowed. Every private vulnerability they had weaponized for an audience, it had all led here. They had always done this. I had simply hoped adulthood, engagement, and marriage would make them stop. Instead, the bigger the moment became, the more entitled they felt to it. My fiancé found me there, and I said the words before I had fully planned them. I'm done with them. I did not mean for the evening. I meant completely. Something in me had crossed a line internally, and there was no path back. Not because I was angry in a temporary way, but because I could finally see the truth with enough clarity that pretending would have been a form of self-betrayal. We went back in, finished what belonged to us, and gave them nothing else. New argument. No fresh spectacle. No emotional collapse they could later use to rewrite the story. They kept trying. Of course. My mother wanted private talks. My father wanted to smooth things over with the word joke, as if intention erased impact. A few relatives tried to pressure me into accepting apologies that were mostly explanations. But the spell had broken. For the first time in my life, I was not interested in helping them preserve the image of being a loving family. I saw too clearly how much of my role had always been maintenance. Absorb the insult. Steady the room. Forgive quickly. And protect them from consequences. I refused. By the time the wedding ended, I was already mentally gone from them. In the days that followed, they did what people like that always do when access is threatened. They minimized. They reinterpreted. They recruited others to tell me I was making too much of one bad day. That line revealed everything. It was never just one day. It was a lifetime of training me to accept disrespect as connection. The wedding only made the pattern impossible to hide. So I cut them off that day. Not with a dramatic announcement, but with action. I stopped replying. I blocked numbers. I told the few people who needed to know that I would not discuss them, mediate with them, or entertain messages on their behalf. The silence afterward felt unnatural at first. When you have spent your whole life adapting to chaos, peace can feel suspicious. I kept waiting for the guilt to overpower the relief. It never did. What came instead was grief, but a clean kind. Not grief for losing healthy family, because I never really had that. Grief for finally admitting I had spent years begging for love in a form they were incapable of giving. People still ask whether cutting them off over a wedding was extreme. And that question tells me they do not understand what happened. I did not cut them off over centerpieces, speeches, or one humiliating moment. I cut them off because the wedding exposed, in public and without disguise, exactly how little my personhood mattered to them. It showed me that even on a day built around my commitment, my future, and my joy, they still felt entitled to invade, redirect, and degrade until the focus returned to them. Once I understood that, the rest became simple. I could either continue spending my life recovering from whatever they decided they had the right to take next, or I could end the cycle where it was most visible. Cutting them off did not restore the parts of the wedding they damaged. I will never get those moments back. There are still photographs I cannot look at for long because I remember what was happening just outside the frame. But the day was not a total loss. It became the day I stopped negotiating with reality. My family ruined my wedding. Yes. But it was also the day I finally stopped letting them ruin my life by calling it love. Since then, everything has become quieter in the best possible way. My marriage feels like safety, not performance. My home feels like a place where I do not have to brace for emotional ambush. My milestones are smaller sometimes, but they are mine. And that is the part my family never understood. Control does not create closeness. It only creates endurance. The wedding ended my endurance. I chose myself that day, not in some dramatic burst of strength, but in the calm certainty of finally seeing what had always been true. They crossed the last line in public. I spent the rest of that day making sure they would never cross another one again. So be honest, would you cut off your family after something like this? Or try to forgive them and move on? Drop your answer below. And if you want more stories like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.